Hello, Jason. Hello, Nick. На этой сессии с нами сегодня представители вендора по Tenable. Это в первую очередь Джейсон Кларк, это главный менеджер нашего канала, который отвечает непосредственно за нашу работу как дистрибьютора по региону EMEA. И также таргетированный инженер по направлению Cloud Security – это Ник Харрисон. Hello, colleagues. We really appreciate for your join for this session and to work with you on a one team. Jason, please don't hesitate if you would like to add or some comment for this session. We really appreciate, we're really happy to work with you together.
Thanks, Tash, and thank you for
yeah.
inviting us today. I'm going to stay quiet unless there's any questions that I can help out with, but obviously I'll need you to translate. But Nick will be doing the presentation, the demonstration later. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay. Let's start. Я начну на русском, то есть для того, чтобы была прозрачная коммуникация, будем переключаться так, как вам удобно, з англійського на русский, на українську, без різниці, тобто тут в будь-якому разі так, щоб вам було зручно, зрозуміло, як то кажуть, в одному підході. З нашої сторони, зі сторони оберіг IT, я Тарас Дуброва як продакт-менеджер на цій сесії. І зараз послідовно тоді спочатку коротенько позначимо адженду. Ось, обозначим, какая цель данной встречи, и, соответственно, последовательно пойдем к той главной информации, главной цели, почему мы собрались, а именно рассмотрение обновления вендора Tenable со стороны Cloud Security, добавление еще одного лидера в плане обеспечения клаудной безопасности, это Ermetic, и, соответственно, разберемся, как это у Tenable устроено, какие обновления, концепцию, подход, и дальше уже перейдем на соответствующие кейсы модулей, непосредственно на демо. Тут уже попросим Ника. Ник, соответственно, имеет очень большой опыт в клаудной сфере, то есть и занимается непосредственно и внедрением данных систем, то есть будем рады ответить на ваши вопросы технического характера. Ну и в дальнейшем также будем рады коммуникации для того, чтобы детальнее обсудить все вместе. Ну и давайте тогда в первую очередь обозначим подход, который мы с Tenable, по которому мы работаем. Это в первую очередь комплексный подход по обеспечению безопасности не только в клаудной среде, в клаудной инфраструктуре. Вместе с этим мы сразу же рассматриваем поиск уязвимостей и защиту в принципе в большой гетерогенной среде, где есть различные составляющие от базовой on-prem инфраструктуры и заканчивая, соответственно, так называемым уже более modern assets, как это именно от Tenable звучит, то есть именно клаудная инфраструктура, веб-ресурсы и так дальше. И это тот, получается, подход, который реализован в полной мере со стороны комплексного подхода, комплексной платформы у Tenable. И, соответственно, это дает возможность решать задачи по обеспечению поиска уязвимостей именно современным подходом. Когда у нас есть отслеживание взаимосвязей в различных ресурсах, это все можем свести в одну консоль и обеспечить дальнейший уже такой прогрессивный контролируемый подход в том, чтобы провести полноценный аудит той среды, в первую очередь, там от on-prem, ну и в данном случае мы фокусируемся на данной сессии именно на cloud, и в дальнейшем построить полноценный процесс мониторинга и, можно сказать, нивелирования этих уязвимостей, слабых мест и так дальше, которые здесь есть и появляются. Ну и дальше, смотрите, для того, чтобы нам было всем вместе понятно, в каком инфополе мы сейчас находимся, то есть мы в первую очередь отталкиваемся от общих тенденций, которые есть в мире по отношению к клаудному рынку, к клаудным технологиям. Тут мы это понимаем все, что клауд развивается по основным 3 направлениям, когда у нас есть сразу инфраструктура, отдельно возможность предоставления платформы, сервиса, в зависимости от того, на каком уровне нужно обрабатывать информацию для конечного заказчика. Ну и в дальнейшем это перерастает в развитие и использование отдельных этих технологий у разных заказчиков по разным направлениям в зависимости от задач. И тенденции, ну, тут просто эта таблица выведена для того, чтобы показать, что она неумолима, то есть технологии развиваются, и в первую очередь клауд не только со стороны паблик клауда, но и также со стороны использования локальных провайдеров. И мы будем говорить в дальнейшем сейчас про облако как сочетание непосредственно паблик и, соответственно, локального провайдера. И чтобы дальше немножко еще сконцентрироваться, тут нужно провести некий маленький анализ нашего региона, уже оттолкнуться от того, что мы имеем в мире, ну и, соответственно, проследить, что мы имеем в нашем регионе. Ну и тут, собственно, дублируется, можно сказать, тенденция, то есть рост и использование клауда. То, что вот сказал, он, по сути, здесь это все и отмечается в плане также использования именно гибридной клаудной инфраструктуры. Однако, ну и стоит отмечать конкретный, соответственно, пункт относительно того, что can you hear me?
Так, Тарас, продолжи. Все чутно.
Okay, nice. Sorry. И тут что следует отметить, что мы отталкиваемся от того, что мы имеем на данный момент, на данную, собственно, на сегодняшний день. То есть в первую очередь заказчики используют в большинстве случаев, конечно же, on-prem инфраструктуру. То есть вся основа, она в любом случае еще остается от статуса quo. Однако, когда мы смотрим вот на конкретную аналитику, то следует отмечать то, что нужно идти в ногу со временем. И если решать задачу, соответственно, vulnerability management, которая есть сейчас, то нужно учитывать и данную тенденцию. То есть есть смысл смотреть на комплексную платформу, где через какое-то время, через полгода, с переходом, с использованием клауда, нужно будет также и данную задачу закрывать. И в данном случае вендор Tenable идеально в этом случае подходит. Вот, сейчас мы покажем, как это, в принципе, данный подход реализован в единой платформе. Однако, вот когда я отметил, что вот так все красиво, тут стоит заметить, что и реалии, они как бы диктуют еще дополнительные условия. В странах непосредственно Казахстан, Узбекистан, Азербайджан, Грузия и также Украина есть и были до этого за последний год-два, ну, в первую очередь в Украине война, понятно, а в странах Узбекистан, Казахстан и Азербайджан были отдельные условия, связанные в первую очередь с предысторией использования клауда со стороны законодательства. Ну, то есть еще есть некоторые соответствующие триггеры, которые не позволяют, так сказать, активно развивать данное направление. Однако с учетом того, что время идет, мы смотрим сразу уже на 24 год, и тут, в принципе, можно сразу, ну, как бы, учитывать в любом случае тенденцию развития клауд. Когда мы уже посмотрели на то, что вот такой подход, он имеет место быть, мы рассмотрели тот подход, что клауд будет использоваться, то нужно оценить первую очередь, понятное дело, и защищенность, если мы говорим о Cloud Security. И когда мы смотрим вот на данный дашборд, мы оцениваем реальную ситуацию тех респондентов, которые используют какую-то гибридную инфраструктуру, и по их отзывам в 50% случаев они в принципе комплаенсом недовольны, и это обозначает тот факт, что нужно со стороны дополнительно подходить к защите гибридной инфраструктуры, и дальше это уже переходит в выбор конкретного решения. В этом плане Tenable предоставляет, как уже сказал, комплексную платформу, и в работе непосредственно с уязвимостями, с выявлением слабых мест и анализом той или иной части инфраструктуры, задачи используются передовые методы, и, соответственно, у Tenable есть отдельный Tenable Research исследовательский центр, который фокусируется на повседневном улучшении базы знаний по уязвимостям, и, соответственно, показатели, которые вы видите на экране, это в первую очередь характеризует Tenable как одно из лучшее решение на рынке в данном направлении. То есть, в первую очередь, наибольшая база знаний по уязвимостям, и наибыстрый, можно сказать, самое быстрое создание готового плагина по закрытию. Далее. И, соответственно, переходим уже почему мы собрались. Тут вот мы обозначили на сессии, в первую очередь, в начале, что развитие, то есть дополнительный вендор, и чтобы было последовательно понятно, как это у Tenable произошло, то за последние 2 года было приобретено не только одна компания Ermetic, но и отдельные компании, которые занимаются OT Security по направлению защиты Active Directory, по направлению Attack Surface Management. Соответственно, то есть то, о чем говорил для связки, то есть вот эти, соответственно, компании в связке в последовательном приобретении Tenable каждой из них была осуществлена возможность именно сбора комплексной платформы. И дальше это, соответственно, произошло также с Ermetic, и в дальнейшем это именно сейчас мы покажем, как это в комплексной платформе реализовано. Ermetic — это, как уже было отмечено, один из лидеров в направлении клаудной инфраструктуры, защиты клаудной инфраструктуры, в первую очередь со стороны обеспечения identity management непосредственно в клаудной среде, и также работы уже и приоритизации рисков. При этом, если мы говорим за развитие Tenable в Cloud Security, то мы смотрим на Cloud Security как одну из составляющих, соответственно, платформы Tenable One, которая является комплексной. И дальше, соответственно, Cloud Security будет поделен на несколько модулей, в сам Cloud Security, непосредственно который будет входить Ermetic, и тот модуль, который был изначально, это в первую очередь Cloud Security Posture Management. То есть это, можно сказать, действительно новый сейчас виток в обеспечении Cloud Security у Tenable. То есть это в первую очередь подход по закрытию комплексной задачи, то есть в первую очередь со стороны анализа возможных векторов атак, с анализа и аналитики тех ворклодов, той загрузки, которая есть, и анализ прогнозирования, как правильно ее распределить. Также это работа с рисками, и в эту же, получается, платформу будет входить, как уже отметил, именно Identity, Entitlement Management, и все это перейдет именно в такую комплексную оценку со стороны рисков. И тут уже, получается, мы будем оперировать вот такими аббревиатурами. То есть тут получается, что первая это CSPM, это как раз Cloud Security Postword Management. Это базовый модуль, который был в Cloud Security. Он отвечал за бесшовную интеграцию с AWS, с GCP, либо Azure. Тут была интеграция попросту с API без агентов. Анализировался с одной стороны код, который был написан, например, в каком-то из репозиториев, и также анализировался на задания конкретных политик, и выводились конкретные результаты относительно того, проходит или не проходит, например, та или иная инфраструктура под конкретный аудит, либо compliance и так дальше. CWPP – это непосредственно Cloud Workload Protection Platform. Это уже как раз то дополнение, которое в данном случае будет в этом новом, можно сказать, перевоплощении данного направления у Tenable. И также это, соответственно, дополнение вот выделено красным CIEM. Это непосредственно Cloud Native Infrastructure Entitlement Management, ну или попросту это продолжение вот Identity Access Management именно в клауде. Чтобы было также последовательно, стоит включить также задачу мониторинга контейнеров, то есть тут это как CSPM, это в первую очередь относится к Kubernetes. Ну, задача тут, соответственно, анализа CI/CD процесса, ну и, соответственно, его отслеживания. CDR – это непосредственно Cloud Detection in Response, то есть это уже анализ, соответственно, также логов. И в дальнейшем это переходит, вот все вот эти аббревиатуры, несколько, мы далее будем сводить только к одной. Вот этой, которую вы сейчас видите, Cloud Native Application Protection Platform. Это уже то, что есть в Tenable на данный момент как решение, которое в совокупности вот этих отдельных, соответственно, модулей дает тот непосредственно уже комплексный подход и выводит задачу уже на совершенно новый уровень. На данном слайде я предлагаю передать слово Нику, для того, чтобы сейчас уже последовательно было понятно именно техническую часть, для того, чтобы было понятны кейсы, best practices и как это реально выглядит на готовой инфраструктуре, на демо. Вот, поэтому далее мы продолжим на английском. Если есть вопросы, задавайте, пожалуйста. То есть тут в чате будем отвечать по ходу самой сессии, либо также будем комментировать после. То есть тут как вам удобно. Nick, can you hear me? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
So I pass the word to you, and I hope you are join. You are join this session.
Yes.
And yeah. So go ahead. The session and main attention for you and your approach, technical competence.
Yeah, sure. So we can just sort of cover, I suppose, some of these points here on the slide. Obviously, with the acquisition of Ermetic, so with what you might hear me call it Cloud Security V2. And if you've used the Tenable product, obviously you might see as well V2 being used in some descriptions. But it is very much sort of an evolution of the original cloud security that we had from our first acquisition, what feels like years and years ago now. As we have the cloud security posture management, which is something that we were capable of before, and same with the infrastructure as code part of the sort of CNAP stack. The really cool part, and something that I will show you in a demo, is looking at that identity aspect of it. So looking at CIEM. so the cloud infrastructure and entitlement management, so looking around the identities there. But also there is the cloud workload protection, so we did have agentless, but this looks more at sort of the snapshot, looking at the snapshots, looking at those vulnerabilities present on workloads across all three hyperscalers as well, which, as Taras mentioned, that's a really positive and sort of very big win for cloud security, is that we support all three hyperscalers. And you do have the cloud detection and response, and this is looking, I suppose, think of it like a cloud version of sort of EDR or XDR or whatever flavor of detection and response you might have, but looking at that identification of suspicious behavior and being able to look at anomalies within your cloud environment. You have another slide to jump onto, Taras?
Okay, which slide?
Do we have just the next slide? If there's another one. If not, I can take over the share and I can jump into the demo. Yeah, cool. Right, let me just make sure I share the correct one. So we should be looking at screen one, and I will share. Okay, perfect. So you should be looking at the cloud security main page. Can you see that okay, Taras?
Yeah, we got that, Nick.
Excellent. Cool. So this is cloud security. So welcome to the new and improved cloud security. What I want to start with is just to give you guys a bit of an overview of this dashboard, because it's there is a lot of information here. And if you've used the previous cloud security in the past or seen the previous cloud security, it's quite a change. So I won't spend too long on this, and we will look at some cool, or I think they're cool anyway, cool scenarios. But yeah, to start with, you can see that here you would have your organizations. Again, support for the big three hyperscalers. So you have your AWS accounts, your Azure subscriptions, and your GCP projects. We also break down all of the resources. So when you have a cloud environment, there is so much information present there. It helps to be able to break it up. And as you can see here, it breaks it down to my identity resources. So I can view all of this information individually. I can pick apart what I need or what I want it to look at. We even look at things around the Azure Active Directory, or even Okta resources, so Okta users, Okta groups, if that's what you use. There's also one login and ping. I do believe there are plans to sort of add more around this and these sort of federated identities. You have your Kubernetes resources, again, broken down across each of the parts with, that each hyperscaler provides. Network resources, computes, so looking at, your EC2s, your virtual machines, even looking at your serverless functions like your Lambda, your cloud functions, etc. So it's nice and segmented and easy to find what you need quickly, rather than having to struggle through a mountain of data. You're just looking at small hills. I suppose, weird analogy, but hopefully that makes sense. The findings as well. So open findings, these are basically, they represent things that are risks. So not just within vulnerability management, to take a step to the side, findings typically cover vulnerabilities and just refer to vulnerabilities. But in the cloud, it's so much more multifaceted that the findings here refers to identities. It refers to vulnerabilities in compute, workload protection, looking at data, network issues, and sort of policies around the network where there might be issues, even secrets. And as we mentioned with cloud detection response, some anomaly detection. Now I have a demo environment, so my anomaly detection is very low, but you might find that yours has a much bigger percentage, and it's all filterable. So if your organization is large enough such that you can factor in medium risks and focus on medium risks as well, then you can include those, and you can see we actually get a few more findings, when you filter by medium as well. But critical and high, typically where the interesting and the high risk stuff is. We also have some trending data. Again, you can filter this over particular time frames. So this just looks at resolved findings, tickets that have been created. It's something good for sort of vulnerability manager or cloud sort of security manager to be able to come in and just kind of pull a bit of information or understand what is going on. We have our compliance, we follow all of the sort of main standards. We even have some of our own, which we term as best practices that you can follow, but we have the CIS, ISO, GDPR, HIPAA, if that applies to you. We look at the MITRE ATT&CK and NIST, all of these fun acronyms that we have. But yeah, this is our sort of compliance tab, so you can have an eye on that. Now, I'm going to come back to toxic combinations. Keep it in the back of your mind, but this one I want to spend a little bit more time talking about, so I'm going to come back to that last. But if you have only 5 minutes, it's actually very, very cool. I think it's a really nice quality of life widget. And the idea is basically if you have a short amount of time left in the day, I should specify, or you want to quickly get something done, these, if you only have 5 minutes, are, whilst critical, quite easy to fix. So I can take an example and I can click through. So we'll take this public IAM role. And when it loads, there we go. So we have our overview, we have our description of what it is, and we have some extra context, and it tells us why this is a critical severity. So it will give high severity permissions if someone can assume it. So let's look at remediation. Oh, that's quite quick. I can easily I'm already logged into my AWS IAM console. So I can just go and edit my trust relationships, edit the policy statement, and then just update. Done. Click of the fingers, that's done. So these, if you only have 5 minutes, are those sort of quick wins that you can grab as a security practitioner, because as I'm sure everyone has experienced, there is never enough hours within the day to get everything done that you want to do. Moving on a bit, we've got identity intelligence. So this gives you a breakdown of identities by a severity level. So you can map certain identities and their permissions and understand the risk. So with a critical risk, this might be those with admin privileges or that can privilege escalate. So they might not necessarily be admin right now, but they can privilege escalate to admin. High would be those with read data or the ability to destroy or grant permission to sensitive resources. And then you have medium and low risks. So you get a breakdown there. You can also look at your excessive permissions. Sadly, quite a common part of cloud security is down to excessive permissions. Cloud environments have grown so fast over the past decade that there might be inactive users that have just been left behind in the sort of rush, in the gold rush of developing the cloud environment. And these could have high permissions. They could be overprivileged service identities. There's loads of inactive service identities from third parties that we no longer work with, but they have high privileges. So there can be a lot of this sort of almost legacy stuff in the background that got swept to the side. Maybe we were going to deal with it later, and later became 10 years and they're still there. Now that's obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit for effect, but I'm sure you might have discovered things like that before in your cybersecurity careers, where things have been left since the system was deployed and those privileges haven't been changed, and excessive permissions can help you find that. We can also look at identify sort of secrets that are exposed. through either ECS task definition environment variables or through our EC2s. There might be a secret exposed. Same again in the version through Azure's way of talking about it. And public resources. Now, public resources aren't necessarily bad. We need public resources. People need to be able to access our things. But is 62 correct? Maybe not. Is having these IAM roles that are global and that are public. That doesn't sound correct to me. 6 S3 buckets, that should only be 2 because I'm in charge of those. I know there should only be 2. Why are there 6? So again, you get these glances at sort of critical issues that can give you a quick, I can just quickly click into that. And then when it loads for me, there we go. I'm straight in. I'm straight into the findings that are relevant to me around my public EC2 instance. And then if we scroll down a little bit more, we have some anomaly detection. This, I could talk about anomaly detection for hours, but you need good data to support it and show it. And unfortunately, my demo environment being very, very static could be difficult to show. Top accounts at risk. This just kind of takes a look at, you know, all of your findings, criticals, highs, mediums, lows, and sort of assigns, you know, the most at-risk accounts where you might want to focus your attention. My AWS is apparently very, very poor. So I might want to put a lot of work into addressing these problems with my AWS environment. Top finding types, again, just by a certain type. And then we have workload protection, and this is sort of looking at your CVEs and those kind of things. So looking at your critical vulnerabilities, your highs, looking at specific CVEs, and the patching status of my OS, and you can kind of filter between Linux and Windows, whatever's there. So that's talking about the dashboard. So now let's come back to toxic combinations. Toxic combinations are a great tool, or it's a great widget. What toxic combinations do is they basically take these independent factors that by themselves are quite a risk. Critical vulnerabilities, I'm sure everyone would agree, are a large risk. High privileges, also a large risk. Public workloads could be a risk, but when you then combine all of those, so when you have the added context and the interlinked relationships that come from having a CNAPP stack, so that full stack of cloud tools, that identity, that cloud workload protection, the detection and response, the networking aspect, when you combine them all together, that creates, I suppose you might call it like the perfect storm, the perfect issue within the environment, where if that critical vulnerability is exploited on one of my public workloads that has high privileges, well, then maybe that intruder, that threat actor, can then escalate themselves to admin, and they're already in my environment because one of my workloads that should be internal is publicly exposed. So they're already in. You know, they don't even need to worry about how they're going to get from one machine to the next because they're now admin. Maybe they've gone cross account. Maybe they've gone from developer or from my dev environment into my production environment. And now with admin privilege, they can laterally move wherever they want. So these toxic combinations are those sort of, if this is exploited, if this scenario comes true, we're in a lot of trouble. And you know, a big thing with cloud is that, you know, there's a lot of data there. There are sometimes an entire business, an entire corporation is in that cloud environment. And if it is compromised, if that data is then exfiltrated with all of the standards, with GDPR, with the data protection acts, that's going to cost you a lot of money. A lot of money. Look at people like Equifax. Look at probably how much Okta will likely be charged. The fees go into the hundreds of millions. Wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing them up in the billions just to start with, as this becomes more prevalent and becomes more the norm, this existing within the cloud. So toxic combinations also give you a nice little breakdown of what the contributors, I suppose, would be the best way to look at them. But we can see that there's issues around workload protection. Makes sense with our vulnerabilities. Network. Again, we have public workloads, so that network contribution. And then we have the identity and access management. And again, this makes sense because we're talking about high privileges. So what can I do with this? What can I do with toxic combinations? Well, you can actually click through. Now, I have 8, 4 split between my GCP and my AWS. But because I already prepared this in advance, I'm going to pick AWS. You would obviously pick whichever one is relevant to you and what you're looking at. And this presents me with my public workloads. I can see a bit of contextual information about them, sort of what they are, what operating systems they've got, the vulnerabilities that are present, VPCs, all that contextual information, that good information that we need as security practitioners. But I'm going to pick this one. That kind of spoiled the surprise already. So this would be a typical landing page. You would land on sort of the overview, and the overview contains a rich amount of information. This metadata pulled from all the different aspects. So we can see a lot of information about the device itself. We can also see its network affiliations. So we can see where it sits in the network. And I can actually see, okay, we've got a security group. So this is basically firewall. And from here, I can actually just go and look at the security group. So I can look at this firewall. I can see that there are some findings already on the firewall, which is interesting. Again, I can go to the overview and I can start to look at the data. And it even has my rules for me. So I can see that the inbound rules, it's actually set over port 80 to accept any IPv4. But then there's another rule here as well, an indirect access load balancer. Interesting. And then we've got SSH over port 22. That's just for, remember my CIDR ranges, 4 IP addresses. Yeah, I think I'm correct there. I think so. We'll go with 4. I might get proven wrong. But we can see now that why these now might be public, why we might have these public workloads. So we've seen, okay, so we know that this might be a potential issue. So let's go back to our host and have a look. So let's go back into our instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the network because I've looked at the firewall. So now I want to see how the network looks visually. I want to visualize what is sort of going on here. And you can see that we get a nice network diagram. There is a very technical name for these. I believe it's like a flow, might be a flow diagram. I always forget, but I find them very useful because it helps me to visualize what is going on rather than looking at all of these confusing names and trying to understand the relationship. So now we can see from a network perspective that our workload here, so one of them, and we know that there are multiples, it's public, thanks, we know from the globe icon, over HTTP 8D, and we know there's a firewall. We can see here that there is a relationship straight to the firewall where it's allowing all IPv4 addresses through to these EC2 instances. But there's also a load balancer here. Now, what has likely happened is perhaps this is just a misconfiguration. Someone was setting up the load balancer. Maybe they duplicated their efforts, or they put this in first before then putting the load balancer and forgot to remove the old rule. But now we know, now we can see, now we can understand what is going on, so we can remedy this. We can solve this misconfiguration, and we can look down here at our 4 IP addresses. I was correct. we can see our 4 IP addresses that comes in over SSH, but we're not overly concerned about this. We recognize that that range. We know who it belongs to. It might belong to the network team. It might belong to the dev team. It could belong to anyone. But we know that it's internal, and we know that it's safe over SSH. And we can also look at it from the findings. So we can see here that it's accessible, and we can see that there are labels which point out that it is privileged, it is public, it is vulnerable, and the OS is unpatched. So another way to look at it, so you could do it through that diagram, or we can click in here and we can view the findings. And as I mentioned, we can modify the security group. So click the inbound rules tab, edit the inbound rules, update the source field to limit access to specific IPs, and delete, save the rules. Easy. So there we've sort of remedied a problem, or by taking away that public aspect, those publicly exposed EC2s, then we can break that toxic combination. We can separate it down. We can ultimately reduce the risk. Reducing the risk is what we are sort of always aiming for, to minimize our risk across our entire attack surface. And with cloud, that's a very large attack surface. So we do what we can to mitigate the risk, and that's one step that we can take. There is also another thing. Just looking at time, I think I'm fine. Taras, do feel free to jump in at any point and tell me to be quiet if I'm running over. But I think we're still good. So another thing, again, I want to focus in on identities, and the reason I'm focusing in on identities is because, as you saw on the slide, 80% of sort of breaches and exploits and sort of potential risk vectors are related to identities. It's such a massive blind spot within cloud, and that's what CIEM is designed to remediate and to sort of fill that gap. And the CNAPP stack of cloud security allows you to do that with greater understanding and wider context. So I want to look into
if it is suitable for you, I just help to share one more slide for understanding how we move on cloud security models. Here, is it
Yep.
suitable for you?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So here we are. Yes. So this is a logical sequence. What we talk, right? So now we are going to the CIEM, right?
Yes, yeah. We'll start looking at sort of excess privilege and how a privilege escalation, so not necessarily having admin to begin with, could actually lead to a breach. So yeah.
Yeah, it just little
Yeah,
comment.
and it's
for,
really good to
yeah, great picture. Yeah, complex.
Yeah.
Great.
Perfect.
So yeah.
Let me, where is it again? There it is. Yeah. Share back up on here. Cool. And as you'll have seen on that slide as well, it does a really good point of illustrating the sort of the financial impact as well. On that, it was about $250,000, but they definitely can go much higher. But yeah, so let's have a look at that. Let's have a look at those identities, and let's try and understand sort of, we've looked at, with that toxic combination, there's definitely some sort of, network, but there's also some posture management there around making sure that we are correctly set up. So now we'll look into the identity and the intelligence. So what I want to do here, so when you come into identity intelligence, you're presented with a lot of information. You can see I've got 523, but you can use filters. So it's a very sort of intuitive filtering tool that you can use depending on what you want to look at. So in this case, let's look at our EC2 instances, because that's sort of where we look to begin with. And so what I'm particularly interested in, obviously you can see again all the risk. You can see these categories. So again, more acronyms, but these ones are at least sort of a bit easier, especially for me to remember. But you have like privilege escalation, permission management, data access, infrastructure modifications, reconnaissance, and there's sort of all the services as well. And if I look at the labels, so these labels are automatically applied by the system. I can see so this is again a public resource, a public compute resource that's privileged and it's vulnerable and it has excessive permissions. That doesn't sound very good to me. That sounds like something that we should really address. So what we'll do is we'll have a look. So we'll have a look in and we'll drill in through the EC2. And again, you can take a quick look. You can see where it sort of sits in the network, all of its information. But what we want to look at this time, so before we looked at network, we looked at the flow diagram for networks. This one is quite simple and a bit boring. But now we're looking at the identities. Now this, I can't even read anything and I'm sat 6 inches from this screen. What we need to do is we need to filter this down a little bit. So we want to look at privilege escalation because we're concerned about the ability of an account to privilege escalate. So what we'll do is we'll just look at privilege escalation, and automatically this has come down now into something that is much more visible, something that's much more digestible for us as security professionals. So we can see our EC2 instance, the instance that can assume this particular role, and now we can see everything that it can do. But this is just mainly in dev. We can enable cross-account, so we can have a look and see where it can go. And from basically compromising this EC2 instance and assuming this role, they can actually cross over into our production account. And you can see there are some particular roles that don't sound very good. Our full access to S3 users, there's a testing role that is public as well. So already this would be ringing my alarm bells. And I would be starting to investigate this instance and look at what and why it is in the state it is. So we can also have a look at the findings. So we can have a look and see, what sort of critical vulnerabilities there might be. So we might have sort of this issue here where this role, it's linked to 2 workloads, and it has obviously the inline service policy, which grants it permissions on loads of services. So we have this severely toxic combination of all of these different issues. And we can actually look into this and we can find our remediation for it. We can find what we need to do. And we can again look at the context to it, so we can understand the story of it. So we can look at the fact that it was created 30 months ago and last active an hour ago, so it's been in use a long time. It's linked to certain workloads, and you can sort of go through all of these. But critically at the bottom, we sort of tell you why. Why is this a critical finding? And it's because of these excessive permissions and the fact that it's linked to an internet-facing compute instance with a critical vulnerability. So again, going back to those toxic combinations, think back to that sort of description that I had there, where it's these perfect storm of issues, of risk factors that can lead to very severe damage to an environment and to a business. And rather than having to find these individually, rather than having to trawl through my permissions, and then I've got to log out of that tool, and then I've got to log into a tool that focuses on my network, and then I've got to take that data and then plug it into there, find the right EC2, and then I've got to go into my workload protection tool. So that's instead with the Tenable tool, this is all here for you. This is all interconnected. This is all presented to you now, I don't really like this term. It sounds very cheesy, but in that single pane of glass, which is something that I know a lot of products like to use, but that idea is the same. You know, you don't have to have these siloed solutions. Everything in that CNAP umbrella allows you to find that. And you could do it that way. So that way I looked very specifically for one thing because I knew what I was looking for. But you could also use what we call a permissions query. So a permissions query allows you to basically look at all permissions, but you can start to look for specific ones. So this queries the complete identity and access management stack. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at so we'll look at our identity accounts. So as you saw at the start, I have all 3 hyperscalers onboarded, but for this, I'm an AWS engineer. Let's assume. I wish I was that intelligent, but we'll look at dev. So our identity account that we're interested in is from development. And again, we're still on the hunt for that privilege escalation issues, for those issues where accounts can privilege escalate, so they don't even need to be administrators. So they could fly under the radar until somebody utilizes that privilege escalation. And we're interested in cross-account privilege escalation. So into my production or master accounts. So now we've started to narrow this down. You see how many we had at the beginning, like hundreds. Now we're down to 11. So this could be quite good. You know, this is still quite manageable, but I'm also more interested in looking at my EC2s, because again, we have a severe problem with public EC2 workloads. Now I'm down to this account again. So we're now back at service 1, and this is a way that you could get to, I use this account in this instance in my previous example because I knew to look for it. But if you didn't know to look for it, you could just look for these particular triggers, these particular filters. And now you've gotten to the exact same spot that I was. We can go one step further with a resource label, because there are five resources in total here that we saw. But some of these might be legitimate. You know, there could be legitimate reasons. But let's look at admin. So now we want to look at those with where admin would be granted. So it could assume role to an admin role. And now we find our target, our resource to look at. So this would be an admin account in prod, and the person can assume it from just a very unassuming service 1 account in dev, but they can assume that role. They can escalate cross account into the users, and I can actually look into users itself, and I can start picking apart all of the identity and access management, or I can dive straight into the findings, and I can see here immediately this user has administrator access on 365 services, but it's only using 40 and only some of them on 11. So if we assume it only needs those 11 services, that's 354 services that it has admin. That's not good. That's very excessive. And you can see here it's flagged as excessive, but it's also flagged as unusual because it's got all of these services where it's got access to. So again, drill into it, look at the context, and look at the remediation. The remediation can be so simple. But if we don't, if you're not aware of it and you don't have the tool to highlight it to you, all of this is at risk. All of these different resources across my AWS are at risk. But the tool helps me to find that, and it helps me to have the remediation, which is actually fairly simple. I just remove it. And just for those that are heavily using cloud, you can also export this remediation steps. You can do it as JSON, as a differential, Terraform, or CloudFormation. So yeah, that's sort of the power of identity and access management. You could see how I went from just sort of finding what looked like an unassuming EC2 to finding an admin account with hundreds, with access to hundreds of services. You know, that might have gone completely undetected because I couldn't make the connections needed. That context was missing if I'd have had siloed solutions. But when you've got a CNAPP solution that's integrated into a platform like Tenable, then you can make these connections. You don't miss these connections. They're flagged to you, and you can go looking for them as well. And you can root out those issues within the environment. So yeah, Taras, that kind of covers everything that I wanted to demo around cloud security.
I can propose to. I would like also help you to make maybe some summary of cases. I just help you with sharing one more slide.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Or yes, 1 second. This one. It is just. It will be okay if you just make this resume from your side. Just
yes, of course. Yeah. So yeah, if we look at this slide, and what I'll do is I'll kind of try and talk to it from sort of left to right. But the key part with cloud security is that context. You know, that is ultimately something that in the past, or if you have, you know, multiple point solutions, individual products for each one, that critical context is missing, or it's difficult to obtain because you might then need to take all of that data elsewhere and try and create the context. Whereas cloud security provides you that context. It gives you the contextual information surrounding what might seem just like an innocent EC2 instance. Now, I didn't touch on it too much. I did show sort of a little bit, is the enforcement of compliance. You know, we match up to all of these standards, to PCI DSS, to GDPR, to the CIS benchmarks, NIST, SOC 2. There are probably so many that I could list, you know, all of these different standards that, you know, we have to adhere to. We help you in that to provide you that framework and show you where you need to change something or where you are falling short of the standard. And then we have the toxic combinations. Hopefully my demonstration was able to highlight sort of the importance of toxic combinations and how useful they are to a security practitioner, being able to find all of these severe issues. And it links back to critical context. You know, these toxic combinations wouldn't be possible without that context. So having, you can now start to see how all of the parts and the moving parts of the tool start to work together to give you the crucial information. And prioritization. You know, we covered if you only have 5 minutes and how sort of quick it can be to remedy those, to just go in and modify a public IAM role. You know, all you've got to do is just go into the console, make a quick change and hit update. But it also helps you prioritize other aspects by using that severity rating, that critical, the high, the medium, separating things so that you can understand, again, with the context, what you need to focus on as a security team, because ultimately there's never enough resources, there's never enough of us in security to defend against the number of threat actors and how quickly they can develop and evolve their attacks. But that prioritization gives us a really strong tool to close the gap and minimize the attacker's advantage that they have. Hopefully that summary was adequate there. And just to talk again around, why global leaders choose innovation and sort of being that market leader in CIEM. It's a very underutilized area. With this tool, you are getting a hold of basically the best of the best in that I don't know what you would call it, like a segment. In that segment, you're getting sort of the best of the best. Easy to use, and it's intuitive. Granted, you are watching me do it, and I do have some experience, so it's quite easy for me to navigate, but hopefully you were able to just sort of look at the filters I was using and understand how simple that is, how easy it could be to just quickly bang together a very simple filter to get you the information you want. It's very intuitive, so you get that quick return on investment. And I feel like I've said this word many times this morning, but again, context. Context is king. It reduces the noise. It cuts down all of the things and focuses you in on what should be a priority for you as a security practitioner. You're not having to wade through thousands of entries trying to find that needle in a haystack. That context is bringing it to the surface for you. And this final one, unfortunately, I can't show you because you require administrative privileges within the tool, but there is automated workflow support. You can link this in with Jira. You can link it in with webhooks. You can use it. You can link it to Slack, to your email. There is that automated workflow support there to make your life as a security practitioner easier. And there's an API as well that you can interact with if you have maybe your own custom-built bespoke tools specific to your business. There's an API for you to leverage. So there is a lot of automation there that can be made use of. So all of these, I suppose, pillars or all of these points are what help us to stand out and what help to put us at the front of the group when it comes to cloud security.
Yeah, Nick, this was a great resume, a great presentation. I just would like to add that we have really great solution on this direction. One more time, it is a complex of several models which we discussed. Здесь what you see, коллеги, то есть мы рассмотрели на данной сессии комплексное решение по Cloud Security. Мы не сможем сразу рассказать детальнее, буквально там все настройки и так дальше. Мы будем рады продолжить диалог, рассказать более детально на индивидуальных каких-то вот уже предметных технических сессиях, когда мы сможем примерить в том числе решение на вашу инфраструктуру, провести пилот, и более детально ознакомить в том числе по лицензированию, по тому, как данное решение может интегрироваться с другими решениями Tenable, в том числе по vulnerability management, по web application security. Также не стоит забывать, что у Tenable есть также наземная платформа, которая также может интегрироваться и с комплексной большой платформой Tenable One. Вся вот эта работа с вендором, она в едином потоке. Мы стараемся комплексно подойти к задаче, в первую очередь, vulnerability management. На данной сессии наша задача была показать именно вот этот, в первую очередь, можно сказать, инновационный подход вендора и то, как он вырос именно перешел на новую ступень именно в защите клауда. И как мы уже обозначили вот в начале сессии, глядя вот на тенденции, есть смысл именно отталкиваться от того, что мы имеем, то есть закрывать уязвимости, задачи управления уязвимостями в on-premise инфраструктуре и заглядывать наперед, смотреть на тот инструмент, который, может быть, уже сразу будет пригождаться в ближайшем будущем. Поэтому я могу только поблагодарить коллег со стороны вендора. Ник, Jason, thank you so much for this great session, for your attention and for your competence on a cloud security. We really appreciate for your work, for working together on a one team, and we hope to continue on this approach and hope to join on one more maybe webinar or another session. It was really great. If you would like to comment, just feel free, please. Or if you have questions, colleagues.
Are there any questions for us to answer, Taras? I don't see any questions, so I don't know where the questions have arrived.
Okay. So let's end this. Nick, maybe from your side, maybe?
Yeah, I suppose just from me, thank you very much for having me on. It's always great to get to talk about the tech. It's a part of the job I enjoy the most. So I'm always up to be invited back if you enjoyed my demos.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys, for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you so much, Nick. One more time, it was really great and really great, overview and journey on the cloud security. Really was great. So let's end this session. Колеги, тогда, если нету вопросов, будемо завершати. Якщо немає питань, будемо закінчувати. В будь-якому разі у нас буде запис цієї сесії. Ми зможемо надати також інформацію, предоставить информацию по данному вебинару, дополнительные сравнения, которые были заявлены, в том числе с решениями смежными, нативными, которые есть по Cloud Security, мы также сможем поделиться уже в индивидуальном порядке и более детально обсудить. So, colleagues, thank you one more time. Thank you for your attention, and have a nice day, have a nice productive week, and keep in touch. Yeah.
Thanks, Taras. Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Bye.